My family owned the most beautiful lie in the city. It was a 2-story brick building with ivy crawling up the walls and windows that held the afternoon sun like honey. It was my grandfather's art studio, and it was supposed to be mine. But a month ago, my parents let the city schedule its demolition without telling me. When I begged them for a loan to save it, they said no. They just invested their life savings in a luxury penthouse for my brother. So, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I waited until the demolition was 2 days away, and then I went to the studio with a crowbar and a secret. And what I found didn't just save the building. It completely destroyed my family. It started with a piece of certified mail, the kind of envelope that's never good news. I remember the slick, unnerving feel of the paper as I tore it open. Inside, cold, bureaucratic words leaped off the page. Final notice of public seizure and demolition. The address listed was 14 Herald Lane, my grandfather's studio. My heart didn't just sink. It felt like it plunged through the floor. The notice said the property had accrued years of unpaid taxes and fees and was slated for demolition in 30 days to make way for a municipal parking garage. A parking garage. They were going to turn my grandfather's sanctuary, a place where color and light and dreams were born, into a concrete slab for Priuses and minivans. For me, that studio wasn't just brick and mortar. It was the only place I ever felt truly seen. My grandfather, Marcus Thorne, was a painter. Not a hobbyist, but a real life-breathing artist whose canvases felt more alive than most people I knew. He smelled of turpentine and coffee and quiet confidence. While my parents were busy pushing my older brother, Liam, toward a future in finance, a sensible path, my grandfather was the one who put my first real paintbrush in my hand. "Your parents see the world in spreadsheets, Ilara," he told me, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You and I, we see it in hues and shades. Never apologize for that." When he passed away 5 years ago, it felt like the color drained from my world. My parents, practical and efficient, as ever, handled the estate. They told me he hadn't left much. A few savings bonds, some dusty furniture. "The art market is fickle, honey," my mother had said, with a sympathetic but firm pat on my arm. His paintings, well, they were wonderful to us, but they don't have commercial value. The studio, they said, was basically all that was left, and it was in such disrepair it was more of a liability than an asset. But they knew what it meant to me, so they transferred the deed into my name. A gesture, they called it. A way for me to hold on to his memory. I was so grateful, so blinded by grief and their seeming generosity, that I never questioned it. I just saw the keys in my hand as the last link to him. The problem was the liability part was true. The building was old. The roof leaked. The wiring was ancient. And the property taxes in that historic district were brutal. I was working as a freelance graphic designer, barely making ends meet. I poured what little I had into patching it up, keeping the lights on, but the taxes piled up. I'd been trying to negotiate a payment plan with the city, but it was a slow, bureaucratic nightmare. But then, a miracle happened. The Sterling Arts Foundation announced a new legacy grant, a massive endowment designed to save a single historic artistic space and transform it into a thriving community arts center. It was perfect. They would cover renovation costs, operational funding for 5 years, everything. It was a dream made tangible. The application was a beast, but I poured my soul into it. I wrote essays, created mock-ups, and submitted a portfolio of my own work alongside my grandfather's lesser-known sketches. 2 weeks before I got the demolition notice, I received an email from the foundation. I'd made it to the final round. They loved my proposal. They saw the vision. There was just one condition. The property had to be legally unencumbered. No liens, no back taxes. I had to clear the debt before they could formally award the grant. The total was just over $82,000, an impossible number for me, but for my parents, it was manageable. They weren't billionaires, but they were comfortable. Dad had a great pension from his engineering firm, and Mom had inherited a tidy sum from her own parents. They lived in a beautiful home, took nice vacations, and had just helped my brother Liam put a down payment on a brand new Audi. My hands were shaking when I called them. I rehearsed my opening, wanting to sound professional and optimistic, not desperate. I laid it all out. The grant, the final round, the chance to turn Grandpa's legacy into a living, breathing gift to the city. I explained the one final hurdle, the back taxes. I wasn't even asking for a gift. I just need a short-term loan, I said, my voice tight with forced calm. The grant money will come through within 90 days of clearing the title. I can pay you back with interest. This is a sure thing. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. The kind of silence that's so heavy, it feels like a physical weight. Then, my dad cleared his throat. "Elara, sweetheart," he began, using the patronizing tone he reserved for what he called my artistic flights of fancy. "We've talked about this. That studio is a money pit. You're pouring your life into a building that's practically falling down." "But that's the point, Dad," I insisted, my voice rising. "The grant will fix all of that. This isn't just a hobby anymore. This is a real opportunity. It's a business plan. It's a legacy." Then my mother's voice cut in, smooth and sharp as glass. "Liam just brought us a real opportunity, Elara. An investment. Something with a guaranteed return." I could hear the pride in her voice, the emphasis on the word, real. "We've decided to put our savings toward a penthouse apartment for him in that new waterfront development. It's a strategic acquisition. He'll live in it for a few years, and the property value is projected to triple." I felt the air leave my lungs. A penthouse. For Liam. My brother, who already had a 6-figure salary, a company car, and the unwavering financial and emotional support of our parents his entire life. He didn't need a penthouse. He wanted one. I needed to save our grandfather's soul. "So you have money to buy Liam a luxury apartment, but you don't have money to help me save Grandpa's studio?" The question came out colder than I intended. "It's not about having the money. It's about making smart decisions," my dad said, his voice hardening. "We believe in investing in tangible assets, in secure futures. We're supporting your brother's career. What you're doing, it's a lovely sentiment, but it's not a career. It's a drain. A drain. My grandfather's life's work, my dream, our family's history, was a drain." "I see," I said, my throat closing up. "So the answer is no." "The answer is we think you should let it go," my mother said gently, as if she were advising me to get rid of an old sweater instead of my entire future. "Sometimes the most sensible thing to do is to cut your losses. The city is offering to solve your problem for you." They didn't see it as saving a legacy. They saw it as the city doing them a favor by demolishing their daughter's biggest problem. I hung up the phone. not with tears in my eyes, but with a strange, chilling clarity. They weren't just refusing to help. They were actively choosing to erase the one part of our family that didn't fit into their pristine, predictable, profitable world. And I knew in that moment that this wasn't just about the money. It never had been. The favoritism wasn't a secret. It was the wallpaper of our childhood home, a pattern so consistent you eventually stopped noticing it until you were pressed right up against it. Liam was the firstborn, the prodigy, the son who hit every mark with effortless precision. He was captain of the debate team, got early acceptance into a prestigious business school, and landed a coveted internship at a top-tier investment firm before he'd even graduated. He was their shining success story, a walking, talking testament to their good parenting. I was the other one, the quiet, introspective daughter who preferred charcoal sketches to calculus homework. My victories were smaller, harder to quantify on a resume. Winning a local art competition didn't get a celebratory dinner. It got a hesitant, "Oh, that's nice, honey. Is there prize money?" My report cards, filled with A's in English and art, but B's in physics, were met with concerned frowns. "You need to be more well-rounded, Elara," my dad would say, peering over his glasses. "The world doesn't pay for doodles." It was my grandfather, Marcos, who paid for them. He'd buy me professional-grade sketchbooks and oil paints, smuggling them to me like contraband. "Don't you dare let them dull your edges," he'd whisper, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Your edges are where the light gets in." The financial disparity became more obvious as we got older. When Liam needed a new laptop for university, my parents bought him the top-of-the-line MacBook Pro without a second thought. When my ancient desktop computer died mid-semester in my design program, I was given a lecture on budgeting and told to get a part-time job. I did. I worked 20 hours a week at a coffee shop, smelling of burnt espresso and exhaustion, just to afford the tools my program required. When I'd come home late, my mom would sigh and say, "I just worry you're not focusing on the important things." The ultimate symbol of this divide was the car situation. For his 21st birthday, Liam was given a brand new sedan. It just appeared in the driveway one morning with a giant red bow on it. The justification? He needs a reliable vehicle for his internship, and he needs to project an image of success, my dad had explained, beaming. A few years later, when my beat-up 15-year-old car finally died, I asked them for help with a down payment on a modest used vehicle. I was met with a spreadsheet. My mother had drafted a detailed repayment plan, complete with an interest rate slightly higher than the bank's. "This is a good learning opportunity for you, Elara," she'd said. "It's important to understand the value of $1. I understood the value of $1 perfectly. I also understood that, in their eyes, my value was significantly lower than my brother's. After my grandfather passed, the dynamic solidified. Liam was the executor of their future legacy, and I was the curator of a past they deemed irrelevant. They'd visit his pristine downtown condo, bringing expensive bottles of wine and bragging to their friends about his latest promotion. They never once set foot in the studio. Not for a visit, not to see the repairs I'd made, not even when I hosted a small open house for local artists. When I sent them photos of the event, my mom's only reply was a text. "Looks a bit cluttered, honey. Be careful with the fire hazards." So when they chose Liam's penthouse over Grandpa's studio, it wasn't a shock. It was a confirmation. A final, undeniable statement of my place in the family hierarchy. I was the sentimental project. He was the blue-chip investment. And they were, above all else, prudent investors. I didn't call them back. I didn't beg. Their calm, rational dismissal had flipped a switch in me. The grief and panic that had been choking me for days began to solidify into something harder, something colder. Resolve. They wanted me to cut my losses? Fine. I would. But the studio wasn't going to be one of them. The day after that phone call, I walked out of my apartment and never looked back at the option of asking them for anything ever again. I sat on the cold concrete steps of the studio, the demolition notice clutched in my hand, and for a moment, I let myself feel the full weight of the despair. It was a physical thing, a crushing pressure in my chest. They were going to bulldoze this history. They were going to let it all turn to dust. And for what? For Liam to have a better view of the harbor? Then, a flicker. A tiny, defiant spark. It was my grandfather's voice in my head, clear as day. Never apologize for it. I stood up, brushed the dust off my jeans, and unlocked the heavy wooden door to the studio. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old paint, wood, and memories. Sunlight streamed through the grimy panes of the huge north-facing window, illuminating dancing dust motes like tiny stars. This place wasn't a money pit. It was a treasure chest. And they were about to bury it. Not on my watch. That afternoon, I launched what I privately called Operation Save the Soul. I couldn't get a loan. Not a conventional one. My credit was mediocre, and I had no collateral besides the studio itself, which was currently a legal liability. So I turned to the only other resource I had, the community my grandfather had built. I started a GoFundMe page, calling it Save the Thorn Studio. I poured every ounce of my heart into the description, telling the story of my grandfather, of the building, of the sterling arts grant that was hanging in the balance. I uploaded photos, pictures of his powerful, vibrant paintings, black and white shots of him teaching a class in the very same room I was sitting in, my architectural mock-ups for the future community arts center. Then, I did something that felt both terrifying and empowering. I started emailing. I dug through my grandfather's old address books, a treasure trove of spidery handwriting. I found names of his former students, gallery owners who'd known him in the 70s, fellow artists, and old friends. I sent emails to local art bloggers, the city's historical society, and the arts editor at the local paper. My subject line was simple. They're tearing down Marcus Thorne's legacy. For 24 hours there was silence. The GoFundMe page sat at $0. I felt a familiar wave of hopelessness wash over me. Maybe my parents were right. Maybe nobody cared. Maybe I was just a sentimental fool, clinging to a pile of bricks. I went to bed that night with a knot in my stomach. I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing incessantly on the nightstand. It wasn't just buzzing. It was vibrating with a frantic energy. I picked it up, my eyes blurry with sleep, and saw the screen lit up with notifications. The first donation had come in at 3 a.m. It was for $50 from a woman named Clara, with a message. Your grandfather gave me my first scholarship to art school. He said I had fire in my lines. I never forgot that. Go get 'em, kid. And then the floodgates opened. It turned out the arts editor had run a small piece on his blog. A local historian I'd emailed had shared the link on a popular city forum. The donations started pouring in. $20 from a former neighbor. $100 from a man whose mother had bought one of Grandpa's paintings 30 years ago and still cherished it. An anonymous donation of $1,000. Messages flooded my inbox. People shared stories about Marcus, how he'd inspired them, how he'd given them critiques that changed the way they saw their own work, how his public art had defined their neighborhood. It was overwhelming. It was beautiful. And it was utterly humiliating. These strangers, these people who owed me and my family nothing, were reaching into their pockets to save a piece of our history that my own parents couldn't be bothered with. Each donation was a testament to my grandfather's impact and a glaring indictment of my parents' indifference. By the end of the week, we had raised just over $30,000. It was a miracle, a stunning display of community support. But it wasn't enough. I was still $52,000 short, and the demolition date was looming, now less than 2 weeks away. The initial adrenaline rush wore off, replaced by a grim reality. We had performed a miracle, but we were still going to fail. That night, Liam called. It was the first I'd heard from him since I'd announced the campaign. I expected a lecture, a dose of his signature condescending pragmatism. "I saw your little fundraiser," he began, his voice devoid of any warmth. "Mom and Dad are concerned. You're airing our family's private matters in public, Elara. It's embarrassing." "Embarrassing?" I shot back, the anger I'd been suppressing finally boiling over. "You think this is embarrassing? What I find embarrassing is that strangers have more respect for our grandfather's memory than his own son and daughter-in-law. What I find embarrassing is that they'd rather buy you a palace in the sky than preserve the only thing he left that truly mattered." "It was a smart investment," he said defensively. "It's about securing our future." "Your future, Liam? It was always about your future." I was pacing the dusty floor of the studio, my voice echoing in the empty space. "Did it ever occur to you that I might want one too? That my dreams might be just as valid as your stock portfolio?" There was a pause. Then he said the words that shattered any lingering hope I had for family solidarity. "Look, I get that you're sentimental about the old place. I am too. But Dad's right. You need to let it go. Stop making this a bigger deal than it is. It's just a building. Just a building." I hung up. I didn't have the energy for a clever retort. I just clicked the red button on my screen and stared into the darkness. He was them. They were him. A united front of pragmatic, soul-crushing indifference. And I was completely, utterly alone. Or so I thought. The day after the call with Liam, I was in the studio, listlessly sorting through old canvases, feeling the deadline like a physical weight on my shoulders. We had 10 days. The fundraising had slowed to a trickle. The initial wave of support had passed, and the brutal math remained. I was going to lose. I was going to stand on the sidewalk and watch them tear down the walls that held my happiest memories. I sank onto an old wooden stool, my grandfather's stool, its seat worn smooth over decades of use. My eyes fell on a stack of his old journals, tucked away on a dusty shelf. I'd looked through them before, but mostly for his sketches and notes on technique. This time, I picked one up and just held it, needing to feel some connection to his unwavering belief in me. I flipped through the brittle pages, past sketches of shorelines and portraits of strangers, and a loose folded piece of paper fell out. It was a letter. The handwriting was his, but shakier. dated just a few months before he died. It began, "My dearest Delara." My heart clenched. "If you're reading this," it went on, "it means I'm gone, and that your parents have likely done exactly what I predicted. Underestimated you. They are good people in their own way, but they are terrified of anything they cannot measure. Do not hold it against them. Pity them, for they will never know the joy of creating something from nothing." Tears pricked my eyes as I read on. He wrote about his pride in me, about the fire in my lines that he saw from the very beginning. And then came the paragraph that changed everything. "I have left you more than just this dusty old building. I have left you a legacy. Your parents believe my most valuable works were sold off in the 80s to pay for their house, and I let them believe that. But my best work, my real work, the lost collection, as the critics called it, is safe. It is for you, for your future. Go to the north wall, the one with the big window, 3rd floorboard, from the east corner. It's a little loose. Pry it up. Your future is waiting underneath. Don't let them measure it. Make it soar." I read the paragraph 3 times, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold the paper. The north wall? A loose floorboard? It sounded like something out of a movie. A desperate, foolish hope. But the letter, it was real. His voice was in every word. I scrambled over to the north wall, my heart pounding against my ribs. I knelt down, my fingers tracing the dusty floorboards. 1, 2, 3 from the corner. I pushed on it. It gave slightly. A tiny, almost imperceptible wiggle. It wasn't my imagination. I didn't have a toolbox. Adrenaline surging, I ran to the back room and grabbed the one thing I could find. A heavy, rust-flecked crowbar that had been leaning against the wall for probably 30 years. I wedged the tip into the thin crack beside the board and pushed. It groaned in protest. I put my whole body into it, the metal cold against my hands. With a loud crack, the old nails gave way and the board popped up. I peered into the darkness below. It wasn't just a crawl space. It was a carefully constructed, hidden compartment, lined with what looked like oilcloth to protect it from moisture. And nestled inside, wrapped in layers of canvas, were 6 rectangular shapes. My breath caught in my throat. With trembling fingers, I reached in and lifted the first one out. It was heavy. I carefully unwrapped the protective layers, and then I saw it. It was a painting I recognized instantly from one of his old exhibition catalogs. Sunset over the Sound. The first piece from his acclaimed Lost Collection. A series of 6 masterpieces he had allegedly destroyed in a fit of artistic pique in the late 1980s. An event that had cemented his legend as a brilliant but volatile talent. The colors were even more vibrant, more alive than in the photos. The light seemed to emanate from the canvas itself. It was breathtaking. I unwrapped the others. They were all there. All 6 of them. The entire Lost Collection. They weren't destroyed. They were here. He had saved them. For me. And in that moment, another, darker realization hit me. My parents. They had handled the estate. They'd spent weeks clearing out this studio. They had told me, with such certainty, that there was nothing of value left. There was no possible way they could have missed this. A loose floorboard, in the exact spot he spent most of his time? A hidden compartment? This wasn't an oversight. This was a deliberate lie. They knew. They had to have known. They hadn't just dismissed his legacy, they had actively concealed it. They gave me the deed to a building they believed was worthless, leaving me to struggle with the taxes, all while knowing a multi-million-dollar fortune was sitting under the floorboards. Were they waiting for me to fail? For the city to seize the property so they could somehow swoop in and claim the contents after the fact? The thought was so monstrous, so deeply cynical, that it made me sick to my stomach. They hadn't just chosen Liam's penthouse over the studio. They had tried to bury my inheritance so they could fund his future. And maybe their own. The demolition wasn't just a tragedy they were allowing to happen. It was the perfect crime. If that building came down, this compartment and its contents would be reduced to rubble and dust. The evidence of their deception would be gone forever. The rage that filled me then was cold and pure. It wasn't the hot, fleeting anger of a family argument. It was the icy, enduring fury of profound betrayal. This was no longer about saving a building. It was about claiming what was mine and exposing them for who they truly were. My grandfather's letter was my shield and my sword. The paintings were my ammunition. I didn't need their help anymore. In fact, their help was the last thing on earth I wanted. The next 48 hours were a blur of calculated action. I didn't call my parents. I didn't call Liam. My first call was to Arthur Vance, a name I recognized from my grandfather's journal. He was a highly respected art appraiser and a trusted friend of Marcus's. My second call was to a woman named Evelyn Reed, a lawyer specializing in estate litigation, whose card I found tucked into the same journal. The message was clear. My grandfather had been preparing for this war long before it began. Arthur arrived that afternoon. He was an elderly man with kind eyes and a will of steel. When I showed him the paintings, he didn't speak for a full 10 minutes. He just looked, his eyes scanning every brushstroke. He brought out a magnifying glass, a small blacklight. Finally, he looked up at me, his eyes wet with tears. "My God," he whispered. "They're real. I thought they were gone forever. Elara, do you have any idea what these are worth?" I shook my head, conservatively. He said, his voice trembling slightly. "You're looking at 8 figures. Minimum. The Lost Collection is the holy grail for thorn collectors." 8 figures. The number was so absurd it didn't even sound real. It was more than enough to save the studio. It was enough to fund the art center for the next century. It was a life-changing, world-altering amount of money. And my parents had tried to let it be bulldozed. My meeting with Evelyn Reed, the lawyer, was next. She was sharp, no nonsense, and radiated a quiet competence that immediately put me at ease. I told her everything. The will, my parents handling the estate, their claims of the studio being worthless, the demolition notice, the letter, the discovery. I showed her the photos of the paintings and Arthur's preliminary valuation. She listened without interruption, her expression hardening with every word I spoke. When I was finished, she leaned back in her chair. "This is more than a simple dispute, Elara," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "This is fraud. Deliberate, calculated fraudulent concealment of assets. The fact that they allowed the property to go into foreclosure, knowing its contents, pushes this into criminal territory. They weren't just waiting for you to fail. They were actively engineering it. The plan we formulated was simple, elegant, and brutal. We would halt the demolition immediately by placing the full amount for the back taxes in an escrow account, which Evelyn could do that day. This would force the city to stand down. Then we would schedule a formal family meeting. My parents, Liam, myself, and my 2 surprise guests, Arthur Vance, the appraiser, and Evelyn Reed, the lawyer. I sent the email that evening. The subject was Urgent Family Matter Regarding the Studio. I requested they meet me there the following afternoon. I kept the tone neutral, professional. My mother replied within minutes. Elara, I do hope this isn't about asking for money again. We've made our position clear. It's not, I typed back, a grim satisfaction spreading through me. I have some new information to share. It's imperative that you both and Liam are there. The next day I arrived at the studio an hour early. The 6 paintings were lined up against the far wall, each one resting on a simple easel, covered by a plain white cloth. Arthur and Evelyn were already there, sitting quietly on 2 folding chairs. The demolition notice was taped to the wall beside the front door, a stark reminder of what was at stake. At precisely 3 p.m., my family's car pulled up. My mother got out first, wearing an expression of strained patience. My father followed, looking stern. And then Liam, looking irritated, like I had pulled him away from something far more important. They walked in, and the atmosphere immediately chilled. "All right, Elara, what is this all about?" My mother began, her eyes sweeping dismissively around the dusty space. "You've got us all here." "I do," I said, my voice steady. "Mom, Dad, Liam, I'd like you to meet Arthur Vance, a renowned art expert. And this is Evelyn Reed, my legal counsel." The word counsel hung in the air. My father's eyes narrowed. Liam shifted his weight, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "Legal counsel? What on earth for?" my dad demanded. "For this," I said. I walked over to the first easel and with a slow, deliberate movement, pulled away the white cloth. The vibrant colors of sunset over the sound flooded the room. My mother gasped. Liam's jaw went slack. My father's face, for the first time, lost its mask of paternal authority and turned ashen. I unveiled the next painting, and the next. One by one, I revealed the entire lost collection. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the distant sound of city traffic. "You told me there was nothing of value here," I said, my voice quiet, but carrying the weight of 5 years of deception. "You told me his work had no commercial value. You told me this building was a liability." My mother found her voice first, a shaky, unconvincing whisper. We didn't know. How could we have known? We never would have." "Stop," I said, the single word cutting through her denial like a knife. "Just stop lying." I held up the letter. "Grandpa left this for me. He knew you'd underestimate me. He knew you'd lie. He told me exactly where to find them." My father stared at the letter in my hand as if it were a snake. He looked from the paintings to me, his face a mask of panicked disbelief. "This is a misunderstanding," he stammered, looking at Evelyn. "The estate was settled years ago. These paintings they belong to the estate." Evelyn stood up, her presence commanding. "Actually, Mr. Thorne," she said coolly, "they belong to Elara. They were a specific personal bequest outlined in correspondence between Marcus and myself and deliberately concealed from the rightful heir. What you're looking at is not a misunderstanding. It's evidence." She gestured to the demolition notice on the wall. "And that is intent. You are going to let a multi-million-dollar inheritance be destroyed to cover your tracks. A fortune that, I believe, You were already earmarking for other investments." Her eyes flicked pointedly toward Liam, who looked like he had been punched in the gut. He stared at our parents, a horrified, dawning comprehension on his face. "The penthouse," he mouthed silently. He finally understood. The seed money for his strategic acquisition wasn't from their savings. It was from the planned, illicit sale of my inheritance. He wasn't their golden child. He was their accomplice. My mother started to cry then. Not tears of remorse, but tears of self-pity. "You don't understand," she sobbed. "We just wanted to provide for our family. We wanted to give Liam a secure start." "By stealing from your daughter?" I asked, the question hanging in the air, heavy and unforgivable. "By erasing Grandpa's memory and my future all at once?" My father, cornered and exposed, finally dropped the pretense. His face contorted with a rage born of humiliation. "You were never going to do anything with it," he roared, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "You would have let it all rot. We were being practical. We were making sure his legacy was put to good use, not wasted on some pipe dream of a community center." And there it was, the truth. Not an accident, not a misunderstanding. A choice. They saw me as unworthy of my own inheritance. They had appointed themselves the arbiters of my grandfather's legacy, and in their judgment, I had been found wanting. "His legacy is not for you to define," I said, my voice shaking with a cold, controlled fury. "And you will not get the chance to touch it ever again." Evelyn stepped forward, placing a folder on a dusty workbench. "This is a settlement offer," she said. "You will sign over any and all claims to the studio and its contents. You will formally acknowledge Elara as the sole, rightful owner of the Lost Collection. You will issue a written apology for the fraudulent concealment of assets. In return, Elara will consider not pursuing criminal charges." My parents stared at the folder as if it were a bomb. Liam looked at me, his eyes pleading for the first time in his life. But he said nothing. He had made his choice years ago, every time he accepted their praise and their money, without a single backward glance at me. "You have 24 hours to sign," Evelyn said. "Or we file our complaint with the district attorney's office tomorrow morning. And Mr. Vance has already been in touch with the art world's leading journalists. The story of how the Lost Collection was found, and almost lost again, is one they are very eager to tell." I looked at their shattered faces. My mother, the perfect hostess, undone. My father, the pillar of integrity, exposed as a thief. My brother, the golden boy, tarnished by their greed. There was no triumph in that moment, only a vast empty ache. The family I thought I had, the one I had kept trying to earn my way into, had never really existed. It was just another beautiful lie, and I was finally ready to let it be demolished. They signed. Of course they signed. The threat of public humiliation and criminal charges was a language they understood far better than love or loyalty. The apology was a masterpiece of passive aggression, written by their lawyer, full of phrases like, "regret any misunderstandings," and "our intentions were always rooted in a desire to protect the family's long-term interests." It was a non-apology, a pathetic attempt to reframe their theft as a misguided act of parental care. I filed it away without comment. It was just another piece of evidence. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The story broke, just as Evelyn had predicted. "Lost Thorn Collection found in condemned studio," screamed the headline in the city paper. The article, meticulously sourced by Arthur Vance, told the dramatic tale of the discovery, the looming demolition, and the family dispute over the inheritance. It didn't explicitly name my parents as villains, but it didn't have to. The implication was clear. Their social circle, the one they had curated so carefully, evaporated overnight. Friends stopped returning their calls. Invitations to dinner parties dried up. The whispers at the country club must have been deafening. They had built their identity on a foundation of unimpeachable respectability, and in one fell swoop, that foundation had crumbled into dust. Liam was hit the hardest. The financing for his penthouse, which had been contingent on a large imminent cash injection from our parents, fell through. He was forced to pull out of the deal, losing his substantial deposit in the process. His strategic acquisition became a very public failure. Worse, his firm, an institution obsessed with optics and integrity, launched an internal review. He wasn't fired, but he was sidelined, his golden boy status irrevocably tarnished. The bridge between us wasn't just burned. Its ashes had been scattered into the wind. He left me one final bitter voicemail. "I hope you're happy. You've ruined everything." I never replied. He still didn't get it. He was a casualty of their war, not mine. As for me, my world exploded in the best possible way. With the paintings authenticated and insured, the Sterling Arts Foundation not only awarded me the legacy grant, but offered to partner with me on a national level. The Thorn Community Arts Center was no longer a pipe dream. It was a major, fully funded cultural project. We paid the back taxes with a cashier's check that made the clerk's eyes bulge. The demolition order was rescinded. Renovations on the studio began immediately. We preserved the original brick and the huge, beautiful windows, but modernized the infrastructure, making it a state-of-the-art facility. We built classrooms, a gallery space, and subsidized studios for emerging artists who couldn't afford a place to work. One of the paintings from the Lost collection was loaned to the city's main art museum, with a plaque that read, "On loan from the Marcus Thorne Foundation." The other 5 were secured in a climate-controlled vault, their value acting as the permanent endowment for the center. My grandfather's legacy wasn't just preserved. It was amplified, made accessible, and turned into a living engine of creativity for generations to come. He had wanted it to soar, and now it was. I saw my parents only once more, about a year later. I was leaving a meeting at the newly opened center when I saw them standing across the street. They looked smaller, grayer. My mother was clutching her purse like a life raft. My father stared at the building with a look of hollow resentment. They didn't see me. They were just looking at the beautiful, vibrant place that had risen from the ashes of their lies. A place full of light and laughter and art. A place they could never enter. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I just felt nothing. They were strangers who shared my DNA. Their power over me, the power to make me feel small and unworthy, was gone. I had spent my entire life trying to earn a seat at their table, only to realize I was meant to build my own. The lesson in all of this isn't about money or revenge. It's about value. My parents saw value in property, in stocks, in projecting an image of success. My grandfather, and now I, see value in creativity, in community, in legacy. They tried to trade a priceless inheritance for a penthouse with a good view. They thought they were being practical. But some things in this world can't be measured in square footage or return on investment. Some things, like a father's belief in his daughter, are worth everything. They had that once, and they threw it away. And no amount of money could ever buy it back. So here's my question to you. Did I go too far in exposing them? Or did I simply hold up a mirror and let them see their own reflection? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you have a story about fighting for a dream that others dismissed, I want to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell, because this new chapter is just getting started.